There was a moment when I was only in rehab for like, I don't know, 3 weeks or a month, and I got the call. We want to renegotiate the giant contract for season 8 and 9. And I was on the phone. I said, I don't think so.
There are television finales that wrap things up neatly, send characters off with warm goodbyes, and leave audiences feeling satisfied. And then there are finales that drop a grand piano on someone's head. 2.5 Men chose the piano. That single moment, absurd, unexpected, and dripping with meta-commentary, became one of the most talked-about endings in sitcom history. But to truly understand why that final scene hit the way it did, you have to go back to the very beginning of the show, trace its remarkable rise, survive its most chaotic period, and follow the strange road that led to an ending nobody quite saw coming. This is the full story of how 2.5 Men went from a barstool idea to a television institution, and exactly what happened on the night it said goodbye. The origin of 2.5 Men is surprisingly ordinary for a show that would become anything but. In early 2002, producer and writer Chuck Lorre was having a casual conversation with a friend, a divorced man juggling single parenthood while sharing a home with his free-spirited bachelor brother. That conversation stuck with Lorre. There was something comedic and relatable in the collision of those two very different lifestyles forced together under one roof. He began developing the idea alongside writer Lee Aronson, and slowly a concept started taking shape. The earliest version of the show looked quite different from what audiences eventually watched. The original pitch centered on a single father, his gay brother, and a straight son, a setup that CBS executives worried could prove controversial and limit the show's commercial appeal. Network executives pushed the creators toward something simpler and broader. What emerged from those early discussions was a revised premise. A fun-loving, financially comfortable jingle writer named Charlie who shared his Malibu beach house with his uptight chiropractor brother Alan, who had recently separated from his wife and arrived at Charlie's door with his young son Jake in tow. That dynamic, the carefree bachelor life crashing headlong into suburban responsibility, became the beating heart of the series. Even once the concept was locked in, getting the show actually made was far from guaranteed. Just 2 weeks before the pilot was scheduled to film, CBS came dangerously close to pulling the plug entirely. The production budget, which sat at around $1.2 million per episode, was considered unusually high for a sitcom at the time. Facing potential cancellation, Chuck Lorre made a significant personal decision. He voluntarily reduced his own salary and worked to renegotiate the contracts of other cast members to bring the numbers down enough to satisfy the network. It worked. CBS gave the green light, and filming moved forward. Every detail of the production was attended to carefully. The iconic Malibu beach house that would become one of television's most recognizable sets was modeled directly after Lorre's own home. Set designers visited his real house to capture the layout, the feel, and the casual coastal atmosphere, then recreated it on a soundstage where filming could happen on a controlled schedule. Even the show's theme song, Manly Men, was composed by Lorre himself, reportedly written in under an hour as production was already underway. The title of the show was one of the last things finalized, selected less than 3 weeks before the premiere after various other options were considered and rejected. 2.5 Men captured the central relationship, 2 adult brothers and 1 young boy, in a way no other title had. The series premiered in September 2003 and found its audience quickly. Charlie Sheen brought easy charm and natural comedic timing to the role of Charlie Harper, a character who was essentially a fantasy version of a man who had never grown up, someone who drank freely, dated constantly, and avoided responsibility as though it were a communicable disease. John Cryer played Alan Harper as the anxious, perpetually put-upon straight man who moved in as a temporary guest and somehow never left. Angus T. Jones rounded out the central trio as Jake, Alan's oblivious and cheerfully dim-witted son. The chemistry between the three was immediate, and audiences responded enthusiastically from the very first season. By the middle of its run, 2.5 Men had grown into something extraordinary. During the 2008 to 2009 television season, the show was regularly drawing more than 15 million viewers per episode, making it one of the most watched comedies on American television. Charlie Sheen was at the undisputed center of that success. His performance felt effortless in a way that few actors achieve. He inhabited Charlie Harper so naturally that the line between the actor and the character began to blur in the public imagination. That blurring, as it turned out, was not entirely fictional. The show's rating success translated directly into negotiating power. By 2010, Sheen had become the highest-paid actor on American television, earning more than $800,000 per episode. When his contract came up for renewal, he pushed aggressively for $2 million per episode, a figure that shocked network executives and producers alike. CBS and Warner Brothers, the studio behind the show, initially countered with $1 million per episode. Sheen refused. Negotiations were intense and prolonged, reportedly continuing through a professional basketball game as the deadline for CBS to announce its fall schedule loomed. Eventually, a deal was reached that pushed Sheen's per-episode earnings to nearly $2 million when profit participation was factored in, at the time, the richest television acting contract ever signed. The agreement was remarkable partly because of what had been happening in Sheen's personal life. In late 2009, he had been arrested following a domestic incident involving his then-wife. Despite that controversy, the studio signed off on the historic deal because executives were convinced that the show simply could not survive without him. They were probably right at that moment. But the problems that had been simmering behind the scenes were about to boil over in a very public way. During production on the 7th season, things had already begun deteriorating on set. There were episodes where Sheen reportedly arrived unable to perform his duties, forcing writers and crew to rapidly redistribute his dialogue to other cast members just to keep filming on schedule. His relationship with Chuck Lorre became increasingly strained. Sheen frequently clashed with Lorre over the scripts, sometimes openly dismissing the writing in front of cast and crew. The environment on set grew tense and difficult for everyone involved. Things came to a head in early 2011. CBS and Warner Brothers made the decision to temporarily halt production on the show to give Sheen space to address his personal struggles. What happened next stunned the entertainment industry. Rather than stepping back quietly, Sheen launched into an extraordinarily public and increasingly erratic media campaign. He gave interviews at a relentless pace, appeared on television programs, made claims about himself that baffled observers, and generated viral phrases that spread across the internet at a speed that had rarely been seen before. When he joined Twitter in March 2011, he broke records by gaining 1 million followers in a single day, a testament to how transfixed the public had become by the unfolding spectacle. The attacks on Chuck Lorre became personal and very public. Sheen made comments in radio interviews that went far beyond professional disagreement, using language that many found deeply offensive and crossing lines that could not be uncrossed. The relationship between the two men, which had always had tension running beneath it, was now openly and permanently fractured. On March 7, 2011, CBS and Warner Brothers announced that Charlie Sheen had been fired from 2.5 Men. The termination letter from the studio was reportedly 11 pages long and outlined in considerable detail the reasons for the decision, including conduct that disrupted production, public attacks on Lorre, and concerns about the actor's personal well-being. For the approximately 200 crew members and support staff who depended on the show for their livelihoods, the shutdown meant 8 canceled episodes and an estimated $10 million in lost production. Sheen responded by filing a lawsuit worth $100 million against Warner Brothers and Lorre. That legal battle eventually settled privately, with the exact terms never publicly disclosed. Part 3. Ashton Kutcher and the second act nobody expected. With its lead actor fired and an enormous amount of uncertainty hanging over it, the show faced a genuinely existential question. Could it continue at all? CBS needed to find a replacement fast. The network had a major presentation to advertisers coming up, and arriving at that event without a confirmed new lead would have been catastrophic for confidence in the show's future. At one stage, Hugh Grant appeared to be the frontrunner. Producers reportedly offered him $1 million per episode, and for a time negotiations were moving forward productively. Then, in May 2011, Grant withdrew from discussions, citing creative differences. His exit created a crisis. The advertiser presentation was days away and there was still no replacement. The name Ashton Kutcher entered the conversation around May 12, 2011. Events moved quickly. Within roughly 2 days, a deal had been negotiated and Kutcher was confirmed as the new lead. He signed on for 1 season of 26 episodes at a total of $20 million, a lower per-episode rate than Sheen had commanded, but still a substantial commitment from the network. CBS announced the casting on May 13, just in time for the advertiser presentation. The announcement was met with genuine skepticism in some quarters. Kutcher was well known and widely liked, but his fan base skewed younger than the show's traditional audience. Critics questioned whether he could carry the comedic weight of a show that had been built so entirely around Sheen's specific persona. Chuck Lorre, however, was publicly confident in the decision and made clear that the production team was enthusiastic about what Kutcher could bring. Kutcher's debut, in September 2011, drew more than 28 million viewers, roughly double the show's typical ratings, and a number that reflected enormous public curiosity about what the show would look like without its original star. His character, Walden Schmidt, was deliberately designed to be different from Charlie Harper in meaningful ways. Where Charlie was cynical and guarded, Walden was emotionally open and frequently overwhelmed. Where Charlie moved through the world with total confidence, Walden, despite being a technology billionaire, was often socially awkward and emotionally lost following a painful divorce. The introduction episode began with the fictional funeral of Charlie Harper, the character's in-universe death explained as the result of being struck by a train in Paris. It was a darkly comic exit that gave the show a clean break from its past. The dynamic between Walden and Alan Harper, played continuously and skillfully by John Cryer throughout every season, became the new engine of the show. Notably, the arrival of a naive, inexperienced new character allowed Alan to shift from purely playing the hapless victim to occasionally playing the wiser, more experienced voice. It was a small but meaningful evolution for a character who had spent years at the bottom of every social hierarchy on the show. Kutcher later commented that the character of Walden evolved considerably from what he had been told to expect before joining, suggesting the writers continued to shape and develop the role as they responded to what was working on screen. While the transition from Sheen to Kutcher had been navigated relatively successfully, a different kind of disruption arrived in 2012, and this one came from an unexpected direction. Angus T. Jones, who had been with the show since childhood, appeared in a video connected to a religious organization in which he encouraged viewers to stop watching 2.5 Men, describing the program as morally objectionable. Jones had joined the show as a 10-year-old and had grown up in its environment, becoming one of the highest-paid child actors in television history at his peak, earning $300,000 per episode. But as he grew older and his faith deepened, he had become a committed Seventh-day Adventist. The content of the show grew increasingly uncomfortable for him. The jokes about sex, alcohol, and irresponsibility that formed the foundation of the show's humor sat uneasily with his evolving values. He had quietly asked writers to reduce his involvement in scenes he found personally objectionable, and his demeanor on set had become noticeably more withdrawn compared to the energetic young actor he had been in earlier seasons. The video made all of that private discomfort suddenly and very publicly visible. The reaction was swift and divided. Some people respected his willingness to stand publicly by his convictions despite the financial cost of doing so. Others in the industry viewed his comments as a significant professional breach, a criticism of the colleagues who had been part of his working life for nearly a decade. Jones issued an apology the following day, clarifying that he had not intended to disrespect anyone he had worked alongside. He did not, however, walk back his concerns about the show's content.